Mauri from Mujer Latina Today. We're connecting Latinas from all over the world, but we have the pleasure today to interview Angela Alvarez Velez. She's a journalist, she's a writer, but today she's going to talk about her new book, Primavera. Welcome to Mujer Latina Today.
Thank you, Lorena, for having me.
You're in Bogota, Colombia, but...
I'm in Chía, which is just outside of Bogota.
Outside of Bogota, and we all have a story to tell. And because you're a writer, and your book Primavera is a wonderful book in English, let's talk about a little bit about your story so people can know about Angela, que vive in Colombia. She stays in Colombia, but she's writing about us that we live here.
I'm a cultural mutt, actually. I was born here in Colombia. I was born in Pereira, a small town in the middle of the coffee region, right in the valley, a beautiful city surrounded by lush greenery and gorgeous mountains. But my family moved to the United States when I was 3 months old. So I was raised in the U.S. I grew up half of the time in Minnesota, and then we moved to Georgia. We moved to Atlanta, a city which I absolutely adore and remember fondly and have just the best memories of my childhood are from Atlanta. And then when I was around 10, my father was a consul for the Colombian government, and we moved back to Colombia when I was 10, and then we had to go back and forth from Colombia to Miami for, different reasons. So I was sort of, when I was there as a younger child, I'm Caucasian, I've got dimples, I've got freckles, I've got blue eyes, so I didn't look very Latina, but I was. My house had a hammock. It was the only, if you were going to go to our house on Norcross, we would say, okay, look for the house with a hammock on the porch, and that would be our house. And, we would have arepas, and we would have, all these customs and things in common. But then, I was also in Little League, and my sister wanted to be a cheerleader, so we were very much bicultural. And we were Latinos when it wasn't cool, because in the 80s, the only Colombian people ever heard of was Juan Valdez. So it wasn't, we didn't have Shakira, we didn't have Juanes, and we didn't have James Rodriguez and all these things all these positive cultural icons that younger Colombians have today. So we sort of kept the fact that we were Colombian a little bit hidden. It was impossible to hide. I was, especially in Minnesota, I was the only kid in school whose last name ended in Z. So it was
those kind of awkward moments when you're a child and then you feel embarrassed. But let's talk about, you went back to Colombia and you get adapting to a new culture or maybe an old culture, trying to understand who you are. Let's talk about that transition, because every time I go back to my country, I feel I don't belong here. What I'm doing here, I don't belong here. So let's talk about that.
Felt a little bit like Celia Cruz, siempre ser extranjera. I'll always be a foreigner wherever I am. Because then, in the US, I was like, okay, I'm Colombian, I'm never going to fit in, I'm weird, I'm different. But then we came to Colombia, and I was still weird, and I was still different, because all the girls my age listened to Flans and Menudo, and I was into Madonna and Michael Jackson. It was the 80s, a little bit of cultural, historic reference. Before 1991, Colombia was a closed economy, so it was easier to find gold than it was to find a Milky Way. And we didn't have internet, we didn't have cable TV, so all the TV shows were either dubbed or they were in Spanish or they were Mexican. The movies that came here were Mexican or they were dubbed in Spanish, and I didn't understand it, I didn't get it, and I would watch El Chavo del Ocho and I didn't laugh, and Sábados Felices, I just wouldn't get the jokes, I just didn't get it. So I was a foreigner here too, and here I was La Gringa. So then, again, we hid the fact that we spoke English, and we hid the fact that it was kind of embarrassing and weird, and I didn't understand, it took me forever to understand geography, and when I got here, we had already passed Colombian history and Colombian geography, so I never learned that in school. So now as an adult, there's parts of the country that I don't know where they are. And there's, historical figures that I don't know what they did. And so it's sort of a mishmash of conflicting cultures, and sometimes that was a source of discomfort for me, and sometimes shame also, because I felt that there was these two conflicting parts of me, and now as an adult I've accepted and I define myself as an American kid trapped inside a Colombian adult.
You know, let's talk about when you went back to school, because I think that you were really looking to express, to tell your story, and you went to study journalism, to become a writer. One of your famous article, it was part of the an antología. There's a famous Daniel Samper Pisano, que is a prolific writer, also journalist, but also a lawyer. I think let's talk about that process, because we as a writer, we go through a learning process until we find ourselves and say, you know, this is me.
Well, Ash Beckham, the wonderful Ash Beckham says that we all, and for me, my closet was being a writer, and I hid my ability as an artist. I hid it behind journalism. I said, okay, I'm going to study journalism, which was the closest thing to being a writer that I could study while still remaining, you know, socially respectable, because, you know, when you say that you're an artist, you get the groans and you get the eye rolls and, you know, you're going to starve and all these things. So I said, okay, no, you know, I'm not a writer, I'm a journalist. And then I became a columnist. And then, you know, finally I said, who am I kidding? I'm an artist, and I came out of my closet and I said, I'm not going to do interviews. I was a translator for a long time and a journalist. And in those jobs, I was not completely happy, because what I was doing was I was putting the words of others before my own. I was putting the thoughts and the experiences of others. And I did love being a journalist, but there was something in me that was saying, there's something else. There's something in me that wants to be new and creative, and there's something that I want to put into the world that wasn't there before. So I had my midlife crisis a little bit early. So, a couple of years ago, I said, you know what? I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I'm not going to hide it anymore. And I just threw myself into writing my novel. I've had 2 books published in Spanish, both journalist books. There was a book called La Tarde 30 Años, which is the history of local journalism in my hometown of Pereira. And I had a column for several years called Mundo Moderno, and it was that column that was included in the anthology that you mentioned, in an anthology done by Daniel Samper Pisano, one of our most beloved and prolific humor writers. So I was a humor columnist for a long time, and then because humor was for me a sense-making mechanism, and also a coping mechanism, because so many weird things happened, you know, with the culture clash, that I resorted to humor in order to sort of defend myself and shield myself, and I would laugh at myself before others could laugh at me, because I mispronounced words both in English and in Spanish. And, you know, for the longest time I thought Heidi Klum was a lingerie model, because I didn't know how to pronounce lingerie and stuff like that.
I go through that, and I think humor has helped us to go through this new life that we live, and that's what I write. But let's talk about Primavera, because for me it's an awakening. It's a story about you. You say that it's a story about faith, family, and food. Let's talk about that story, about how the combination of the three.
The novel is called Primavera, a story about fate, family, and food. The title Primavera, of course, is the word in Spanish for spring, and but the story is in English. The story follows Judy, a woman who was adopted from Colombia at a very young age, and she was raised in the United States as an American. She was adopted by an American family. She has American siblings. She does not fit the description of the Latina bombshell. She's much like me, Caucasian with light eyes, and so she's never identified as Latina. And she's got, you know, what could appear to be the perfect life. She's engaged to this wonderful guy, and she's got this really cool job, and she's a lawyer, and everything is going great, and then it all falls apart. And as her life falls apart, she realizes that unless she accepts the part of her that is Colombian, and unless she learns how to honor all of herself, she will never be whole, and she will never feel complete. So she embarks on a journey to come to Colombia to find her biological relatives and to discover herself. And the reason it's fate, family, and food is because she experiences much of Colombian culture through the flavors, because that's one of the things that has been, and it's still a struggle for me, it's to reconcile the flavors of both cultures. So when we were in the United States, we would have, and relatives and friends would come visit us. They would take us, arequipe, and they would bring arepas, and they would bring tamales, and they would bring bocadillos. And it was just such an exciting moment, My mom and dad would flip out and they say, "Oh my God, you have to try this." And some of the things were delicious, and some of the things were like, "Oh, I'd rather have my usual bowl of Fruit Loops." And now that I'm here, we cook with what we have, but then occasionally I find a box of hash browns and I'll flip out and I'll get so happy because I get to eat something imported, and I see a box of Pop-Tarts and the reaction just is not normal. My reaction to a box of Pop-Tarts is off the charts because I don't see it every day. And so there's a part of me that still, the flavors are so connected to our memory, and the sensory memory of flavors, and the way that particularly Latinos preserve our culture through our food and the rituals that we have, not only to prepare but to consume the food. We're still a culture that very much eats together as a family, and we share our meals, and during the meals when you share your stories and where you hear the stories about your grandfather and your grandmother and all these things. So to me it was very important that Judy experience the tastes and the flavors and the sensations and all of these things of the food.
I just think about you, and I think about the struggles that we all go through with finding ourselves, like identity, and to understand that we're bicultural, bilingual, and we can make mistakes in both languages, and it's okay because that's the way we have to learn to be ourselves. This book, you finished 80,000 words. It took a long time. It's about you. I think it's your story with how you find yourself and eliminate your fears. But where we can read, we would love to read Primavera. Let's talk about that.
Oh, right now, I'm looking for an agent because even though I've been published here in Colombia, trying to break into the English-speaking book world, having been published in another country practically means nothing. You have to start from scratch. And so the first thing I need to do is find an agent, and I'm in that part. There's a lot, one of the things that I've discovered is that being a writer involves a lot of things that have nothing to do with writing. So you have to query people, and you have to find an agent, and send a sample, and get the thing, so there's a lot.
You should write about this, not about that, and
yes, but about there's a lot more in the. Don't you have anything with Asians? No, I mean it's not about but not a lot of people are adopted. Yeah, that's true. The story is about a woman who was adopted, but it's not about adoption, and it's not about being Colombian. Because if you say, "Oh, well, I'm not Colombian, so this story isn't going to speak to me," it's about yourself. It's about finding yourself. It's about anyone who has ever felt any tension between, something that you love and something that you think is the idea that we have to choose, which I think is a very old-fashioned way of thinking. When we're children, we're taught that, in and out, light and dark, skinny, fat, tall, short. We're taught opposites. And we sort of configure our brains to think that's either or. But I think that as we grow older and as a society, as we mature, we need to make space in our brains for the and, not just the or. That we can be both. That you can have, that you can love tamales, but then you can also love hot dogs, and you can love football, which is different from American football. We can love football, but then you can also love baseball, and that you can have it all. You can celebrate Cinco de Mayo and Thanksgiving. And I think that books like this and stories like this help us engage in a conversation about by everything. Bicultural, bilingual, and hopefully embrace, in broader terms, a more fluid concept of the self and of identity and of gender and of being and of a lot of things that right now people have like this idea that you have to choose, and that there's some sort of center, and that you have to, that the center of who you are is rock solid and that you can't change it. And I think that one of the milestones that we have to hit as humans is to embrace diversity, and not only amongst, within each other, but within ourselves. I woke up this morning feeling Colombian. I reacted Japanese to this German song stirred something in me. And it's fine, and it's all me,
It's
and it's
fine.
all good.
Well, we looking forward to read Primavera. I love the story because it
As
reminds me my daughter, the journey that we're facing, and it will be wonderful that you can find an agent and they can publish the book here in the United States. I think it's thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview you using Latinas using social media because that's the way to connect and also to talk about us in another perspective because that makes you think about us that it's okay to be bilingual bicultural but also it's okay to
everything,
but it,
multi-plur.
yeah and then it's the time that we it's our voice we need to have our voices heard so something else that you would like to say to conclude the interview.
Thank you very much for allowing me to use your platform to get my voice heard and to hopefully reach other people. I think that the more that we engage in these sort of conversations, the quicker we can change our collective way of thinking, the quicker that we all as humanity can begin to embrace and honor all of ourselves and all of ourselves and all of each other. And I promise that as soon as I get an agent, as soon as I get a book deal, you will be the first to know.
Well, thank you so much. Have a